an inspiring first panel before our lunch. And this is our Reimagining Education panel. For those of you who are just arrived, I'm Joshua Berg. I'm the minister here at Pacific Unitarian Church. We are a Unitarian Universalist community, and I will be facilitating this in one other panel, and then the other panels later that afternoon will be facilitated by other people. So we're going to ask some questions and have a discussion, and we're also going to take questions from the audience. But to do that, we have Gary in the back, who has a basket that is not an offering plate, so don't be scared. Yeah, he will return any money. And these are index cards and pens. If you have a question, just flag Gary down. You can write it on the index card, and he will bring them up to me to ask. All right. So, obviously, public education right now isn't just about academics. I'm not sure what it's about entirely. We'll find out. But there are battles right now. There are battles over truth. There are battles over identity rights. There are battles over democracy. They're all playing out in public education. It's a frightening time, honestly, if you have younger kids or even older kids who are in public education, public schools. So this panel asks, who has that authority in education? Who should have the authority? It asks how pluralism works or how it fails in public education schools, and what our young people are inheriting, and what we and them, we and they together are reshaping. So, because I'm going to start by asking each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves. We'll start closest to me and move that way.
Hi, good morning. I'm Dr. Mary Stevens. I am an adjunct associate professor at the USC School of Education, and I am also an instructional coach at Pasadena Unified.
Hi, my name is Lisa Coleman Greathouse. I am from Chino Valley, so I live in Chino Hills now. I'm a native New Yorker, though. I've been here almost 30 years. I am a former journalist, communications professional, and right now I am co-founder of a group called Chino Valley Defenders of Public Education, trying to fight against some of the extremist views coming out of our current school board.
Good morning, Samantha Weiss. I'm a social studies teacher in Rancho Palos Verdes up here on the hill. I'm also the president of the Palos Verdes Faculty Association. I'm a state council member to California Teachers Association, and I'll be a delegate next week to the National Education Association Representative Assembly that will be held in Denver, Colorado.
All right. Have these illustrious speakers. So because we are reimagining education this morning, I'd like you to start, and any one of you can jump in, we have another mic here, by listing one standard or aspect of public education today that must change, one foundational thing that we may have lost, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing, and or one thing that we have to preserve. So whoever wants to start.
I'll go backwards if that's okay.
Sure.
One of the things that we have to preserve, and I think sometimes we take it for granted, that we have a public education system in this country, and that it's something that is a foundation of our democracy. And it is in danger right now. This is a very dangerous time in public education where we have almost half of our states in this country moving to private voucher systems that are going to completely drain the money that now supports our public education system and putting it in the hands of individuals so that you, regardless of how much money you might make, $5 million a year, but you're going to get money, our tax money, so that you can now use that money to pay the private tuition at your child's private school. This is happening right now in states all over this country, and it does not mean that it can't happen here in California. We have forces that are moving in that direction, and a federal government that is moving in that direction. If this happens, our public education system will be dismantled pretty much. Private schools, as most of you know, can handpick their students and decide who can be there, and there won't be any money for special education. All of those students will wind up being subsidized in our public schools. Poorer families that just can't navigate the system will be left out. And so it's going to completely change the way our children are educated now, and will dismantle the whole idea of an equitable, free education for all students, no matter who you are or where you live. So that's something that I care very much about preserving, is just our public education. Something that I think that we could change and should change is that I think our public education system is somewhat slow to adapt to a very fast changing society. So I would love to see classes that really, and they don't have to be specific classes, they can just be interconnected in our existing classes. But things that address AI and the ethical use of AI and putting guardrails around it. Right now it's the wild, wild west, and our schools are already seeing the effects of that. So I would love to have that integrated into classes students are already taking, that talk about how to use it efficiently. And my son just mentioned the term prompt engineering to me, and how important that is in teaching students. I would love to see media and news literacy taught in our schools. It's the only way that we won't have another generation of people who are so easily led into conspiracy theories. Let's teach our students how to fact check what they're reading online. So those things, I think, really need to be integrated in our public education system, and they're really not right now. And something that may have been lost, I think, in a lot of schools, we've done away with things like shop class and home ec, and even like financial literacy. I would love to see those kinds of things come back. I think students need to, students who may not be on a college path need to have opportunities that help with getting into those vocations that frankly won't disappear with the advent of AI into our job market. So making sure that kids have those pathways into vocational training, and oftentimes those start with things like shop class. So I would love to see those kinds of things work out. I think that covered all of it.
California Teachers Association is spending a lot of resources trying to combat some of the things that Lisa mentioned in terms of like academic freedoms, the problems that you're seeing in Chino with the forced outings of our LGBTQ community. A lot of the resources are spent trying to combat this. Also, when she spoke to all these states, we also have many of these states with the voucher programs that are right to work states, which is such a misnomer, but basically they are anti-union states. So teachers there have an even worse deal. But speaking of bad deals, I work in this community, and when I reimagine America, I imagine America in which this community would force our school board out of town. They would just say, are you kidding? You don't pay our teachers family health care? Shame on you. I mean, I'm sitting there at the school board meetings fighting to get health care for our teachers. We're good enough to teach their kids every day, but they won't pay our health care. That's an America that I never envisaged. But back to the question, sorry.
That's okay.
The Pledge of Allegiance is problematic. If there's something we could reimagine, it would be the pledge. I have kids from Japan, from China, from Taiwan, from all over the place, and they just stand up, because they were taught to be obedient. But I'm like, do you guys even know what you're saying? No, they don't. And kids, none of them know. They don't understand it. They just know every day. My husband's French. He's like, wait, you make kids in America say the same thing every day? He couldn't believe it when I told him about the Pledge of Allegiance. And I was like, yeah. And I mean, by the way, I don't mind being patriotic. I find myself to be very patriotic. But, I mean, we could reinvent something kids say every day, and I bet this space right here could do a better job imagining something we want our children to say every day than the Pledge of Allegiance, because it's not relevant to kids today. How we could make it relevant would be really having to sort of deconstruct and then reconstruct it. Thanks.
Thank you. To go backwards a little bit to what Lisa was saying, that there's such a huge disconnect between schooling and the real world. And we tell our students all the time, this is your preparation to be in the real world. Like when you get out in the real world, and I have tried pushing back on that language because the world that our students are living in is real. And that we are not teaching them certain foundational skills to help them navigate the real world and whatever challenges they're faced with, depending on their backgrounds, socioeconomic status, etc. We're doing them a great disservice. So I think just separating or moving away from that language of, there's school and then there's the real world. This is the real world. And a lot of the challenges that we are facing now at my site, at other sites, and I see it districts all over the place, especially post-COVID, is because nothing matches up. So we have certain expectations in the classrooms, at school sites, for our students' behavior, right? For the way that they must respect the teacher's authority, for certain practices, which just doesn't align with how they'll have to navigate the world outside of school.
Thank you very much. This is fascinating and frightening at the same time. I did want to for Lisa mentioned prompt engineering. Does everyone know what prompt engineering is? It's deciding what to tell AI, I believe, to get the result you want to get. Engineering the prompts. And I'd also love it if, to Sam's point, maybe at lunch or dinner, you all could rewrite the Pledge of Allegiance and then hand it in to us, and we'll figure out which one we're going to use.
Prompt engineering.
Prompt engineering, right. So you talked about many things that Americans know or don't know about public education. Are there other misconceptions about public education that you wish more Americans understood?
One of the things that aggravates me often is people seem to think that charter schools and private schools provide students with a better education than they get at public schools. And studies have shown actually that that's not true. That test scores for private and charter schools are generally no different and oftentimes worse than public school counterparts. I have seen public schools that do an absolutely amazing job and public schools that are frankly really struggling. And all of these things are as unique as the socioeconomic areas that they're in, and a million different factors and influences, and the specific teachers in those schools specifically, and the administrators, and the superintendents of those districts. There are so many factors that go into that, but I think that that's a misconception, is that public schools do worse. That's just not true.
And I think, I'm not an expert, but I've found that the drive to create private schools is also to push religion into education.
Absolutely.
So one thing I don't think people realize, especially in a post-pandemic world, is that, see, after the pandemic, I think a lot of families in America decided that brick and mortar schools are somewhat optional. Like, maybe my kid can just kind of hack their education online, and do a lot of stuff, and they started to feel like, you know what, y'all didn't show up for us. Maybe we need to not show up for you, and attendance has been really bad ever since, getting people to understand. It is vital that kids show up to school more than ever, also because there are so many wraparound services that schools provide. They identify all of the problems. Like a child who doesn't go to school, a homeschool child, is so vulnerable to not having learning learning differences be detected, scoliosis, vision, there are so many things teachers are trained to look for and help kids with. And our schools are just being starved of the money, right? Like, so the money, like they just passed the new budget and they've added pre-K. I'm sorry for like throwing all this different stuff in there, but like the theme here is that there can't be enough emphasis on how much schools need resources. It's sort of like, think of like a bunch of chickens and you haven't given them enough feed and they're all just going in for like, I need this grain, no, I need this grain. It is really ugly right now in education. And it goes back to also, just Citizens United. I just, like, there's I can't place enough emphasis on how we need to get resources back in schools. And you can't do that if you're going to allow corporations to run this country, because we have such a need for all the services in schools. Public school kids need to show up. It's the socialization piece. They need that socialization too. They're not going to get that, at home when their parents, no matter how much parents try to observe them and keep an eye on them, they're going to go to Fortnite or whatever video game or whatever lures them. They're going to check their YouTube channel to see how many views they got. And kids need to be in school. And I think that people don't realize it's brick and mortar is still the deal.
In terms of misconceptions, it was what you said about private schools. Pasadena has the highest concentration of private schools in one area on this side of the Mississippi. And so we are actually, I think, more than 50% of school-age children in the city of Pasadena attend private schools. And, but I have seen the difference between friends that I know, family members, miss out on opportunities because they attend private schools, prep schools, versus my own students in my own classroom receiving college acceptances to highly competitive colleges and universities because of the opportunities that they've been able to take advantage of through public school and our community partners.
Awesome, thank you all. I'd like to move next into the idea of who has authority and truth and democracy, because as we know right now, like my brother is a principal in Michigan in elementary school, and when the new administration came in, he was basically told, stop DEI or you lose your funding. So he had to keep his funding, remove all references to DEI. He's still, they still implement programs that just don't call it that in order to keep his funding. So is it still possible to teach controversial issues to have diversity without being, well, let's talk before diversity about controversial issues, without being accused of political indoctrination. And so what does that look like?
It's possible. I think for those of us working at school sites and for teachers in the classroom, sometimes it's about the risks that you're willing to take. I like to think about it as when you're developing the climate in your classroom and you're building the environment, there's certain guardrails that you have to build along the way too. So at the start of the year, you are open to differing opinions from students, and we teach each other how to how to disagree without it getting hostile. Because what kind of a, like, if we all agreed on everything, that would be such a boring place to live. And so we need the difference in opinion. We need that diversity. And I think a lot of it in the classroom is building those structures so that we can have those discussions without resorting in hostilities. So I think it is possible. And I think it is also our responsibility. And I know that you have, yeah.
So I was a speech and debate coach for about 10 years in Rancho Palos Verdes. Took the kids all over, Harvard, Stanford, Yale. We came home with big trophies, and I proposed there be urban debate leagues. You don't need it to be this erudite thing. You can actually have debate in any school, and there should be debate in every school, speech and debate, teaching kids about ad hominem, and teaching kids about, really excellent argumentation from authority, where you have to actually research and do the topic lit research and make sure that you are getting a depth of knowledge in a topic so that you can understand it. I used to call it transcending the topic, where you've researched everything. You could debate it from either side. That is a skill for life. Our kids who are in speech and debate go on to be able to advocate for anything that they really, truly believe in. We need that for every kid, not just kids in PV. You can have urban debate leagues where they just travel to, Torrance, and they travel to, they go down to Harbor City. They just can go locally and debate one another, and they are fantastic local leagues, and we need that everywhere because, of course, we need to be looking at the hot topics, and we need to be addressing them. And there is an icing effect. So in my school district, they don't want us ever debating affirmative action, right? Oh my God, you can't talk about affirmative action. So I had a parent, and she called me and she said, "How dare you debate affirmative action?" I was like, "Wait, what?" And she said, "My child got into MIT. My child is African American." And she cried for a week. Kids said she only got into MIT because she was African American. And the thing is, I was new in my career, so I was like, okay, I will retire that topic. I'm so sorry. But what I should have said is it is never more important to get your child's story out there. It is never more important that we continue to debate affirmative action. These topics are important, and kids need to understand them, right? They need to understand that for you to be at Harvard or Yale or at Stanford or at Berkeley, like those schools need to be diverse because they are more interesting when they're diverse. And we need education. It's just true that you're going to have certain zip codes that don't get the kids who get a great grade in certain zip codes. Those kids have fought tooth and nail to get that grade despite being starved of resources. So it's a tough job to have to do, and it's unpopular, but like here I am debating affirmative action, lol. But I guess what I'm trying to say is it should be debated. It should be debated everywhere and anywhere. Any topic really can be debated. That's not, something abhorrent. But yeah, it's still important.
I couldn't agree more with that. This is a time that we need to be looking at diverse viewpoints and perspectives more than ever. Unfortunately, in Chino Valley right now, that's not the case. You don't even have to go into a controversial subject, as you said, Josh. It doesn't have to be a controversy for it to be banned in our district right now. So not only did they pass a flag ban so that there can't be any pride flags, nothing except for the American flag and the state of California flag. That's the only thing, that's the only signage at all that's allowed anywhere on our campuses now. So teachers have been instructed to take down anything. We had a teacher that was forced to take down a sign that just said, "All are welcome here." That was somehow deemed offensive. It's unbelievable what's happening and how much people are feeling silenced. I took my CBEST and did some substitute teaching a year ago, actually closer to 2 years ago now. And it was before I think it was actually before the presidential election, like weeks before. I was in a high school government class, and the teacher was out unexpectedly and didn't leave me any lesson plan. So I thought, and I offered up to the kids, if you need to study for something or do your homework, go ahead. But since the election's coming up, I knew I was stepping into it right then. Let's just talk about the importance of voting. So when you are all turning 18 soon, what's the process to register? And kept it completely apolitical. It was just about why do we vote? Why is it so important to vote? And why should you, as soon as you turn 18, be voting in your very first elections? And just kept it open. And even though I kept it completely apolitical, got a complaint the next day. So, it just shows you that even things that should not be considered controversial at all are being censored in some districts like ours. So, very unfortunate.
So thank you for those responses. Yeah, our signs too. I don't know if you noticed. Oh, did you answer the question? You answered it first. Right? Yeah, I'm sorry. We have some signs out there, Black Lives Matter, pride signs that have all been vandalized at some point. So you were all talking about different, debate coaching or different things that kids are involved with in school, maybe outside of instruction, outside of the classroom. What wraparound services, what other services should public schools be responsible for? What are they losing funding for that they need to be responsible for? What boundaries are there that public schools shouldn't be doing?
I can start.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So I think that we are doing a lot of these different services, and I'll just give you one example of where I'm really worried. So there is this new thing where we can get money in public schools by billing private insurance for mental health services. So CTA is watching it closely. We're very scared. Because what if you have a middle schooler who's having a bad day, they're kind of depressed, and all of a sudden the counselor's like, ooh, cash, right here. So you go and you say, hey, you come to my office, you summon the kid to the office, and you ask them a few questions, and now all of a sudden you can be billing for services. This is very scary. So I'm really worried about this, and a lot of the districts are doing it, and I've been this cautionary tale, and PD is not listening. They're like, Sam, this is a lot of money. This is a lot of money that we can get. And I'm really worried about it because it's just this slippery slope where we really, really, if we weren't so desperate for dollars, I'd say, come on, that's not really going to happen. It's going to happen. because that's how starved. Go back to my pecking at the grains image. That's where we're at. And so I'm really worried there does need to be a line in the sand. Of course, we're going to be checking for scoliosis and vision and learning disabilities. And of course, we're going to do, preschool care, after school care. There are a lot of things that the schools just need to do to keep our communities functioning. But at the point where we have this, and then one other thing I'm thinking of is at lunchtime we have KFC Club, Kids for Christ, because it's not during teaching. So the Muslim kids came to me and said, Ms. Weiss, they have a KFC Club. Could we have the Muslim Club? And I said, sure. I said, I'm all about equity. If you're gonna have the KFC Club, I'm gonna host the Muslims at lunch. So I'm doing that, but at the same time, I'm going, these groups should not be on campus, period. So, it's always trying to make these decisions about how do we have equity, but also, what's the bigger picture here? Anyhow, that's my answer.
I think when we think about our responsibilities, we immediately think about the students. And yeah, that's why schools are there, but also we need teachers. And in order for us to teach our students to be able to disagree and to explore some of these topics that we need to be able to debate, we also need to take care of our teachers. And yes, unions are important. However, sometimes teacher protections, union protections, we have the training that our teachers are receiving now is so much more aligned to what we want our schools to look like, the services that we want for our students, the emphasis on culturally responsive teaching and equity and authentic care. This cohort of teachers that have gone through teacher preparation in the last maybe 10 years have that training. And those of us who did our teacher prep more than 10 years ago, I don't want to age anyone, it's been a couple of decades, and who are not as open to the newer professional development to receive this type of training, they're the ones that are remaining. They're still at school, they're still in the classrooms, they're still forcing order and authority that does not align with students' realities. And when we are looking at declining enrollment, we're looking at privatization, it's the younger students or the students that have received the more relevant training, or not, sorry, not the students, the teachers that have received the more relevant training that are getting pushed out, that are getting laid off. And they're sometimes forced to leave education altogether, even though they're phenomenal educators that are loved by the students. So I think when we're thinking about our responsibilities to the school system, I think we should also think about the teachers.
Thank you all so much. Oh, this is a response.
I would just say that there seems to be a push and pull, especially in our district, is that our school board president, Gina Valley, some of you may have heard of her, she's running for state superintendent of public instruction. She likes to say the state is trying to take your children. The state is trying to bring up your children and tell them what to think, and the teachers are indoctrinating your students and telling them that they need to be part of the LGBTQ community. There's a lot of fear-mongering and a lot of really angry rhetoric coming from our school board all the time. And of course, parental rights has become the catchphrase and does not mean exactly what it sounds like, which is basically, do not tell our children anything about what to think, about how to think, just do your job and teach the curriculum. On the other hand, the reality for teachers is that, and I know that there are many teachers in this room, is that children, they're on the front lines, and they're seeing their kids come to class every day. They might be wearing the same clothes day after day after day. They may be coming to school late all the time. They may be not coming to school at all. They may refer to some abuse that's going on. Our teachers are now all of a sudden social workers and therapists and counselors and dealing with all kinds of behavioral issues that 10 years ago, they probably were barely dealing with it all. So they're being asked to do all of these things and to take interest in what's happening in their family life, but they're not given the training or the support or the resources to deal with all of that. But they are being, at least in our district, they're being demonized. Don't talk to our kids about anything. But what are they supposed to do exactly? So one of the other things is the community schools program here in California is grants for billions of dollars, and so many of our school districts are taking advantage of that. They help families. Your school becomes the real center of your community, and you're able to go there for healthcare referrals, and you're able to go there for job seekers and for mental health services, and you get referrals and you get help with all of these things. I think the schools that are doing it are finding a tremendous amount of success with the community schools program, but then you have districts like mine that are saying, oh, there are going to be strings attached with that. And they're going to try to indoctrinate our children and our families. We don't want that. So we basically turn down all of this money, all of these resources that could be helping the neediest people in our community.
Can I just respond to one thing that?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. So I want to speak to older teachers. I consider myself an older teacher, and I've had to learn Magic School Bus, and I've had to learn all the different areas and the buttons and all that. And I just want to say that I do understand that younger teachers are ending up leaving the profession, the profession, and I do acknowledge that. But I do want to say that I don't think a lot of people realize many teachers, and I represent some teachers that are almost octogenarians in my district, in their late 70s, and they can't afford to leave teaching. And I don't think people understand that it's really, really, like most teachers, when I went into the profession, were like, and you can retire around 60. No teachers in my district will retire before 65. And it's because they won't pay their health care. They cannot afford it. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that like some teachers do want to leave. I don't want to leave. I still have a few good years left. But I have a lot of teachers who probably would like to leave, and they just can't afford to. For whatever reason, their circumstance, whether it be healthcare or other things, they need to stay in the profession. So I just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
I'm so glad you all brought up support of teachers. When we have an education panel, it tends to focus, when I've been on, I've seen them, on the students, and that's very important, supporting them, but it's so important to talk about and to support the teachers. So thank you all for bringing that up. I mean, some teachers can't afford to leave, or they can't afford to stay. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm going to get to some of these questions. Quite a few people have asked questions, so I'd like to get to them, and some of them are similar to things that I had. So you all talked about, Mary said we can't teach controversial issues, someone talked about critical thinking, how students disagree, how we teach them through in the age of social media. This first question addresses that. It appears that critical thinking is no longer taught in schools. Is that true? How did that happen? And how can we restore critical thinking in our schools? How can we teach kids to think and to disagree well?
Well, I touched on this earlier, but I think it's so important that we do teach media literacy, news literacy in our classrooms. I think that is a real key to that, really, to critical thinking, to be able to make sure that we are dealing with facts when we're asking students to think through things and to discuss different perspectives and keep open minds. I think when you talked about your debate team and going all over, that is such a critical part of that as well. And I keep coming back to the news literacy because I think that that is really an underlying key for what the future looks like for our society. And so much of that starts in the very early years of school.
So critical thinking is taught. Good teachers are teaching critical thinking all the time. As a social studies teacher, we talk about current events, and one student, this really honored me. There was a woman who was killed in, I believe I think it was Minnesota, and there was this controversy over whether her wheels had turned towards the officer. And one of my students, who's from a very conservative family, she said during the conversation, Ms. Weiss, the wheels were turned toward the officer, and that's why he shot at her. He thought she was going to press on the gas. And in that moment, she honored me by being able to say her political beliefs and to be able to, and I said to the class, I said, this really honors the space that we've created together, that you guys feel safe being able to talk about your opinions and being able to explain from different viewpoints why you feel a certain way. You have to be able to sit and have a conversation. My 12-year-olds can do it. Why can't adults? They sat there, they had this conversation about this woman, this mom who's now gone, and they were respectful of one another. They listened to each other. We do. Teachers every day are teaching kids to be thinking, to be critical thinkers. We are bombarded with images. There are no poor people on TV. They come to see that as truth. It's the teacher saying, why do you think that is? Why do you think there are certain, why is it always, this thin, tall male who is the romantic lead, and then the gal is white and she's often blonde, or she's this really skinny, right? Like, we're always doing these things to try to jar them into seeing that reality looks very different from the images they're bombarded with in social media. We're doing that work. We are. It's just this huge sort of tsunami of images that are countering what we're doing day to day in the classroom.
Yes, and speaking of bombardment, in the last, I don't even know how many years, the more that teachers are responsible for these wraparound services, identifying certain characteristics in our students that would then result in referrals to community partners for counseling, etc., for being a social worker, for being a therapist, for being a parent, for being all these things. And then the number of students in your classroom continues to increase. And then not all students are receiving the services that, even if it's listed in an IEP, that's not being met. And so where there's more and more pressure on teachers to even just get to the curriculum, because first we have to see our students as people, and then we can teach the content. Sometimes seeing our students as people takes up so much energy, the content then gets very little energy. And that is every single day. I teach at the secondary level where sometimes our classrooms have 36 students. Our PE classes have 62 students. And so we're trying to do all these things and have these deep, essential conversations about these topics that we do need to get to, and we do. But we're spread so thin. And so as much as we want to get deeper into these topics and these conversations and explore different viewpoints, and we do, we are also exhausted. And so I think that when the media shows, teachers are not doing this, or highlighting certain voices from certain people saying, our teachers are not doing this for our students, and this is where teachers are falling short, and teachers are not providing these services, etc. they're also not helping us.
This is great that we're hearing all of this, because this is where we need to get involved in local school boards and local politics to help our teachers. We can't just say somebody else in our school, somebody else is going to do that. There are so many. We want to teach media literacy. We want to teach kids how to interact with social media. Yet there's a tsunami of images. There's social media that your algorithm is radicalizing you. There's financial issues, teachers, doing 7 different jobs. So even though these things are being taught and we love to teach them, there's so many challenges. So it's up to us to get out there and get involved locally to change these things so that we can relieve the burden, so that we can have these things taught. Thank you all for sharing that. I want to get to some more of these questions. With the historical lack of ability of public education to keep up with societal progress, do you see any benefits to the dismantling of the Department of Education? Can education become more nimble without it? Can school and real life become more integrated without it? You see how she sighs?
So special education is really so important. The funding, what happened is a bunch of years ago, I think it was like the 1970s, the federal government passed all these laws, federal laws that apply to every single state, that require every public school to identify, to do early identification, to identify special needs, and to provide services. And yet, they pulled the funding. So now you have laws that force all these schools to do these things, and the money is not coming in. We need to fully fund IDEA, which is the acronym for the laws, and without it, the federal government is what is being done right now to dismantle it. It means they're saying the law stays, but all the money, even the money that they were going to give, is going to go away, which is going to make it even worse. So what we've been doing, and we'll be discussing it next week a lot, is how do we fund IDEA? Because school districts' budgets are more and more siphoning away money from the general fund to special education because they have to. It is the law. And so because you have that law, everybody else is taking it on the chin. And by the way, students do need those services. I'm not saying they don't. But where do you pick up the slack? Where do you find that money? And so it's really, really challenging. So I would say I don't see a benefit if you're going to pass laws and then not fund the ability to carry out those laws. It's like you're setting us up for failure. And maybe that's the point, is to have public schools fail, because guess what? Parochial schools are going to step in and go, we can do it, right? But the problem is they don't, because they're founded on the idea of religious discrimination. They will discriminate, and as someone up here said, they don't have to take every student. Public schools have to take every child.
Ditto. I would say that it's not a benefit to see the U.S. Department of Education dismantled. What we should be doing is reimagining what that organization does. And yes, funding special education, investigating civil rights violations, things like this that the department was set up to do and to fund still need to be there. What I think this administration wants to do is send everything back to the states, except for we want the federal voucher program. So things that they want, they're saying federal government will step in and demand that. But everything else, the funding, all of the problems, send all that back to the states. So, right, they don't want to deal with the things that they don't want to deal with, and then they want to dictate the things that matter to them, like private voucher programs. So no, I think it's terrible what's happening to the Department of Education. Every organization can probably run more efficiently, and it's worth a look to see how we can reimagine them. But dismantling it is a real problem.
You know. I met about 10 years ago. I met Dr. Terrence Roberts, who was one of the Little Rock Nine, and I asked him what how he thought how he thinks we can fix some of the challenges that we were facing in education. And he said, you have to start all over. So to what he said, like reimagining, not just reforming, because if we're reforming, we're taking the same model and just tweaking it a few different things and calling it something new. I think it's a complete reimagining. That's what's required. I don't think there is a benefit to dismantling the Department of Education, but the truth of the matter is, regardless of what they decide to do, regardless of what happens to the system, the teachers and the administrators in the schools will continue to do what is best for the students, sometimes at their own personal cost. And that's why we can't forget about it. Because no matter what happens with the funding, with the laws, the adults in the school that are caring for the students will continue to do the best they can with what they have. And sometimes they don't have it, they still get it.
Awesome, yeah. We owe a debt of gratitude to our teachers. We really do. Sign that down. I wanted to, a couple things that people said are addressed in these questions. So just to explain a little further, there is the way that schools are funded. This person asks, is it still, instead of basing it on attendance, is it still based on attendance going to be based on operational costs? How does that work?
It's still based on attendance. It is basically seats, daily seats. That's how the money is calculated. I think if you were to fund it based on operational costs, then it gets really murky because then you're going to go back to the chickens. And each school or each district is going to say this is what we need to run this, and then I can't help but connect to what's happening in Pasadena Unified now with potential school consolidations and closures. There's going to be a fight for those resources, and then the loudest voices will be able to maintain their schools, whereas the voices that are not so loud or don't know how to navigate the system will be marginalized and pushed out.
I was just going to say something else about funding because you have all of the information correct. But in our district, we're a district of 26,000 students. It's pretty mid-sized for California. And our district superintendent makes over $500,000 a year. And we have several assistant and deputy superintendents, and they're all making over $300,000 a year. It's very, very top heavy. And every time the teachers negotiate, and our labor union, our CSEA as well, negotiate an increase, there's a need to clause. So the teachers might be getting a 4% increase. Well, there's 4% and 1%. There, okay, when it's 1%, but when it's 4%, whatever it is, the administrators are getting that as well. So the superintendent who's already making $500,000 all of a sudden is getting an extra 4%. So this keeps happening, and it's frankly, it just makes for such top-heavy administration. And then we have a shortage of instructional aides, and we have a shortage of people working in food and nutrition. And all of these places where there are shortages and people are leaving because the pay is so bad and our climate is so bad right now in our district, they're all leaving, and let me just say the superintendent is not going to leave.
So I think the local control funding formula needs to be changed. Where they get us fighting amongst ourselves is the zip codes. So because if you have unduplicated students, which means children living in poverty, the unhoused, special education, and English language learners. So depending on the percentage you have in each of those groups, you get way more money. So what that does is it makes rich communities furious, and then they are so angry that it's the poor communities that are getting all the money. So does it cost more to educate someone who's living in poverty? It does. No one should be arguing that they shouldn't get that money. We need to transform how we are funding education. It is such a mess. It is so piecemeal. If I told you some of the stories about how the funding comes in, it's so crazy. Like Prop 28 money is supposed to go to the arts, but our school district used it to find a way to, fix the chairs in the auditorium because that's for the arts. I mean, it's so, and all the rules that come in attached to all this money, they need to fund education differently. But back to the question about average daily attendance. CTA has tried to get them to change it to even just enrollment, and they won't do it. They keep it attached to average daily attendance. And I can't explain it. All I can say is we need to radically change how we are funding our schools because they are starving. Poor and rich alike. Where is the money going? Superintendent up here, she makes $320,000 starting on September 1st, $320,000 a year. She doesn't have the Me Too clause, but all of the executive, the cabinet does. So they'll get whatever we end up negotiating. Right now, it's not looking good for PB. We did not get a deal. We're not paid back to July 1st of 2025. We got 1% last year. I mean, I know I'm giving you too much information. I'm sorry about the TMI, but I'll just say that it's bad. I mean, look at like the inflation, and teachers are like, Sam, I can't afford to stay in teaching. And teachers are like, I can't afford to retire. So back to that.
This information is great. It feeds our calls to action. It gets us motivated. We know why we need to be doing this work and reimagine. So thank you. Lisa, you talked about voucher. A few people talked about vouchers. Someone's asking to clarify what is the voucher system.
Well, it's different depending on what state you're in, but the basic gist of it is the federal government, what they want to do is give every parent, guardian of a school-age child a voucher. It could come in the form of a tax credit. There's different ways of doing it, but it basically is going to be a voucher for a set amount of money, say it's $5,000 a year. And you can use that money to send your child to a private school. You can homeschool them and use the money for field trips. You can be taking your kid to Washington, D.C. with that money and paying for, homeschool curriculum. You can do whatever you want as long as it fits some level of criteria. What there isn't, however, for these private schools and charter schools and all that will receive this money, there's very little accountability. So we had a charter school in our district that closed several years ago, where the director was charged with embezzlement and embezzled well over $1 million from the school. The school had a good reputation, the parents were happy with it, and then all of a sudden we find out this embezzlement's going on. The school was closed. They pulled the charter and the school was closed in our community. There was basically, and that was a charter school that was under our district. The private schools will not be under the public school. There will be zero accountability. It'll be their own little board of directors or however that school is run. So that's basically how it works, but that money is our tax money that goes to fund public schools now. So when they start getting into a system where they're giving every parent of a school-age child that kind of money, you can see very quickly how our public school funding is going to be basically
the students who don't have those vouchers, who must go to the public schools that are underfunded, are going to be even worse.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Lisa's story is true for almost all of the charter schools. They almost always figure out, oh, we can't profit off children. For-profit school doesn't work. Oh, shoot. So they pull up, and then the public school's left holding the bag because the money's already been paid out to this program that has failed for whatever reason, whether it be through embezzlement or through any other kind of mismanagement. And then the public school, again, open their doors to everyone. Come in, and we'll figure it out for you.
I just always want to ask, when our education or our healthcare, whatever, is based on profit, how do we value one child over another? It just makes no sense. There's a couple of questions that relate to the Pledge of Allegiance that you were talking about earlier. So the SCOTUS decision in 1943 cites that schools cannot coerce children saluting the flag to pledge allegiance. So this is the first question. With that in mind, will you or have you brought this up at the school board and at the community, A, and B, what is the first step in removing, it looks like they wrote under GOP from the pledge, but I think they meant under God.
Yeah. No, I like those. They're somewhat synonymous these days. But yeah, so right now, so I'm fortunate enough to have always worked with wonderful administrators for the most part, and our administration is very supportive of students who do not want to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and it's teacher by teacher. So at my school, I have a teacher who's like, that is so disrespectful of our armed service people, I will make them stand out of respect. And then and then in my class, I'm like, hey y'all, you just need to be quiet. Those who want to say the pledge can say the pledge. The rest of you, please just be quiet, respectful of them while they do it. It's like so much in education, it comes down to the teacher, right? So, which is why we need to be attracting, great teachers to the profession and making sure they know it's still a good profession to go into. And these days, I can't. My daughter's been telling me she wants to take the CBEST and become a substitute teacher and possibly a teacher. And I find myself so sad. I'm trying to dissuade her. I'm like, oh, you don't want to do that, sweetheart. And that makes me so sad because I grew up with amazing teachers and I have amazing colleagues. And yet I see things going south. So I'm really sad about it.
I could just say that as a wife of a 21-year veteran, he does not have an opinion on whether or not students stand or sit for the Pledge of Allegiance, and he said that's the reason why he served. One of the reasons why.
I love that. I love that.
I have absolutely no problem with that whatsoever, but I wish that I was in a district that was an issue. Our district wants to have invitations at school board meetings, and only by evangelical pastors. So the Pledge of Allegiance is not an issue for me.
Yeah. Wow. And this question of invocations or chaplains in schools that I've heard, it doesn't really address pluralism, obviously, and what does successful pluralism look like? Necessarily, you can give a specific or a broad example. What could it look like where we could have, or should we have, different religious representations, different clubs, chaplains in schools, things like that? What in your mind does pluralism in public education look like?
So I don't really like the clubs. I think that should be done through the churches. What I would like is, so I am a 6th and 7th grade social studies teacher, and part of the curriculum is we teach all of the major worldly religions, and they're taught all the beauty and all the danger, right? So we teach that, and we teach them to respect each one, to understand what the 5 pillars of Islam are, to understand that the oldest monotheistic religion is the Hebrews and Judaism. And we teach these things so that they can compare them and understand their commonality. There is a tithe, right? There is some form of mitzvot in each one, of giving, of caring, of love. And and that is beautiful, but we also teach the history and the dangers and the wars that those religions, have led to, so that they can have a full understanding of the beauty, the art that comes out of it, of this spirituality, but also the danger. And that, I think, is helping our society to understand, like, the common threads that are in all of them. And I also speak to the kids about atheism, and speak to them about how there are plenty of kids, they always think I'm saying sex. Because I'm saying secularism. They're like, what? Did she just say? No. It means you don't believe in any faith, but you can appreciate religions. And it's really important, I think, that they have that sense of it. It should be taught through history. This is part of our history, of world history and of our nation's history. But where I get uncomfortable is these clubs. I just sit and I catch up on the news at my computer. A mom comes in and hosts their prayer on Fridays, but it still makes me uncomfortable. And the KFC kids are across the hall doing their thing too, right? It's usually like selling pizza or something. I just, for Christ, they're selling pizza for Christ. But whatever, it's all good. I just, that part, it bothers me, because we shouldn't really have it at the school. I worry that it gives them it blurs the lines, I guess I'll just say.
Amen. But that was the wrong answer.
I think your class sounds amazing, first of all. And I love the way you describe how you teach it. Our district is very diverse, but you wouldn't know that from our school board, which is completely homogeneous of 5 people who all belong to the same church and do the same things. I think despite that, our teachers do a great job of really promoting the diversity in our district. I just feel like the climate has changed so much that now there's a feeling of sort of looking over your shoulder all the time, but not when one of our school board members, as graduates, are crossing the stage and picking up their diploma and shaking his hand, whispers in their ear, accept Christ is what we're saying. So there's a real difference in what's happening in the classrooms and how teachers are representing history and culture and pluralism so well, and what's actually happening in some school districts.
I think that's where I have hope, because where our teachers, most of our teachers are grounded in equity and diversity, and appreciate and embrace diversity, and are grounded in facts and evidence and acknowledge history. And so are the students, because the students are so much more accepting of each other, and I think that's where I have hope. And so our systems may not reflect it, but our students reflect it. Our teachers reflect it.
It's awesome. I did want to get to hope at some point, and we will more. Thank you so much. By the way, I'm a Association of Professional Chaplains board certified chaplain, and I'm a Unitarian Universalist. So if you need someone to give an invocation,
It's about 60 miles. I don't know if you're still.
That's okay. I drive here from Birmingham. It's not that far. Oh, I was going to say something about that. I forgot. Okay, so we're gonna. I mean, it's like whispering, accept Christ in the ear. If you're a Christian or a certain religious beliefs, if you have a certain religious belief system, that's wonderful. But it's like me as a chaplain going into the room of an atheist patient and saying, Allah Akbar. It doesn't connect. You don't know what that student's family believes or doesn't believe. So it isn't a matter of disparaging religion. It's a matter of respecting that all different have different belief systems and some have not. So this question, let's assume we have many disagreements with the other end of the political spectrum. We'll just make that assumption. Where is there agreement with them on public education? In your experience, what can you say to get the conversation started in a positive way?
They want their kids to feel safe, to be able to say something in a safe space. So just like with the girl who was convinced that this woman had been told lawfully that she was a threat to that officer, like she felt safe being able to say that. And like my trans kids, it's an example. Like when I'm talking to a family that's horrified that a trans child is in their class, I say, if my trans kid can't feel safe, no one feels safe. Because a child, when they see someone being bullied and they don't see an adult coming to their defense quickly, that tells them they're not in a safe space. Because they immediately know, what if the teasing gets turned on me? Every parent wants their child to feel safe in the classroom. So I've won over many a parent, very conservative parent, by just explaining, if any child does not feel safe in my class, no child will feel safe. So creating those safe spaces is essential, and they would agree. They want their kid to feel safe.
Couldn't agree more with that. Not exactly the reality in a district where they make teachers take down welcome, all are welcome here sign. So unfortunately, the environment is not that. One of the commonalities, though, I ran for school board, so I'm not just a person who is perpetually complaining about things. I actually ran. I did not get elected back in 2022. And one thing that I felt really connected with everybody is that you want your kids learning the basics, right? Before we can get into anything, before we can get into AI and media literacy and all of these other great things that we're talking about, kids need to learn how to read well, they need to learn how to write well, they have to learn basic concepts in math, they need to learn history and science, and all of these things. We do need to focus on the basics. Unfortunately, those kinds of things are the same things that both sides are saying. So my opponent was saying the same things that I was saying, really, where we and really, I think just about everybody agrees with that, right? So that is common ground, and I think if we can focus on that, of course, from our perspective, we're saying we want to get down to the basics. You're not talking about education at all at our school board meetings. You're talking about culture wars. So can we get the politics out of our school board? It's sucking up the resources, the time, the energy, everything. Because we're not talking about education and innovation and all of these things that we want our kids to have to succeed. So I'd say that that is a common ground.
Okay.
Parents want their children to feel safe and and to be successful.
Okay.
And we can start with that.
We're coming up, thank you all. We're coming up on the lunch hour. And so I just wanted to ask you each to address this question that Mary, you addressed, but you're welcome to address more, is about hope. What gives you hope about the future of education right now? Either what gives you hope or what is the number one call to action you want us to take away?
The students give me hope every day. Because no matter what happens, no matter whether you're dealing with emotions, disagreement, and talking to the students and understanding why they're feeling, what their concerns are, what they're happy about, they give me hope. And just to work towards a future where all of them feel accepted and loved, in a world where they all thrive. As students will and we're shifting to pronouns and using pronouns, and even starting with the youngest students now. They don't question it; they're just open to it, and that's just, they understand that that's just who that person is, and we're just going to love them because that's who they are. And I love to see that, and I love to hear them talk to each other. And yeah, I think they're just generally their openness and their willingness to love on each other. That's what gives me hope.
It's so good to hear, and I feel that too in our district. I feel like most of the bullying and hate comes from the adults and not from the kids. There's bullying in school for sure, but I see much more of it in our school boardroom than I do when I visit classrooms. I think the students tend to be so much more accepting and smart and not just tolerant, but truly accepting. And that does give me hope. And I see it in some of our high schools have actual groups and clubs of kids that are actively trying to flip our school board. So they're out on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram making videos that are encouraging other students to get involved and stand up and come to our school board meetings and speak out about some of the discriminatory policies that we have in Chino Valley. So that gives me a tremendous amount.
In debate, there's this expression, fairness is a voter. And if there's one thing a kid in class can't stand, it's when a teacher shows that she or he has, or they have favorites. Really bothers them. When a favorite, like, oh, they want fairness. And so I think they get it. They get it so much that it really does, like, you just, by facilitating that and by nurturing that in the classroom, I do think the kids do also give me hope. Because I teach, the sixth grade social studies ends with the birth of democracy in ancient Athens. And the scariest thing for me is Citizens United. And so I tell them, I talk about Citizens United and why it makes it so hard for us to continue to have democracy. Because it's almost like our vote doesn't count. If you have 1 trillion votes, then, my $137,000 votes doesn't really count for much. People have a hard time connecting the dots with that and understanding the untold money in the dark, the money that is going to these campaigns. And so it's hard because I'm not really allowed to talk about that part with my students, but I do tell them that you're learning about democracy in an age when it's dying. So I do tell them that, and I explain it, and we talk about it, but it's hard. But I think we all need to figure it out.
One last thing.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, there was just I just remembered a comment that was made. I think it was Nick, the speaker, and he said that the students are building and they're not asking for permission, and I love that. And I see that in our high school students too. They're not asking for permission. They're just being.
That's awesome. And you all know at 4:15 we have a panel of high school students, 5 high school students. The founder, our own congregant here of the South Beach Young Democrats. We have 2 panelists from the Interfaith Youth Alliance and 2 panelists from the Women's Leadership Project as well. All high school students who recently graduated to talk about activism later. So I hope you're here for that. If you ever forget what love or respect is, listen to a teacher talk about their students. That's what I'm feeling right now. So thank you so much, Dr. Mary Stevens. Thank you, Lisa Cohen Greathouse. Thank you, Sam Weiss. This has been an amazing